Hey, everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Your host, Michael, on a Saturday morning, joined by Kevin Simmons. We're going to be talking about an update to the Pavone situation. I didn't think that we would be doing any more updates, but this one's pretty big, and it's curious that we're not hearing a whole lot about it. The update is that Pavone is now saying it's possible that he missed the Laicization notice, which is huge because I was saying from the start, something is not adding up here. It doesn't sound right. Pavone was saying that, look, his superior was effectively just trying to get him canceled because of his pro-life position. And I was just asking, well, if he's trying to get him canceled, if he's just so eager to cancel him, wouldn't he have served him the laicization notice? But of course, what Pavone was saying is, I haven't been notified over and over. I haven't been notified. I haven't been notified. And I was saying that doesn't add up. You would think that they would be eager to just, wrap that up, put a bow on it, hand it to him, and have a celebration afterwards. Here you go. You would think that they would have been eager to deliver that. But he was saying, no, I haven't been notified. Now we're hearing a different narrative, and that troubles me because it's a significant shift in light of the fact that now the diocese has spoken and in fact said they did notify him. Now his story changes, and I want to take a look at that to see specifically what he says and what the diocese has said. But I want to, of course, remind everybody first, Proverbs 18:17. It says this: the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and cross-examines him. When we hear one side of the story, it's going to sound convincing until somebody else comes along and cross-examines that and offers the other side. So you always want to be sure to say, this sounds convincing, but I bet there's another side to the story. And that's what I was holding out for. I was thinking, I bet, you know what? The diocese probably has another side to this story that would explain this. And in light of the fact that it has now spoken out, we see, the narrative has changed, as we're going to see here in a moment. But first, briefly, before I read the article and we cover it together, Kevin, welcome back to the show. Do you have any introductory comments that you want to get in there before we start to go over the article?
No, actually, I think you kind of covered it pretty well. The only thing I would just add is that when I saw the news from this Catholic News Agency article, I was like, now it's starting to come all together. The pieces were starting to fit a little bit more. Yeah.
But he hung his hat on this idea that he hasn't been notified, and everybody was crucifying the bishop, saying, oh, well, he wasn't notified. This was so underhanded, and this was so dirty, the way that they treated him. And again, it was just there to cancel him.
What I find particularly interesting is Pavone's own admission in this article. I guess he made some statements to CNA or somewhere else that they quoted it, but he's made a couple of notable admissions, and
they're big.
I think I don't know how long today's this broadcast will be, but I think one of the things we're gonna get into is a little thing that Judge Marilyn Milian calls rough justice. Where there's some brass tacks that we're gonna have to sit and weigh. So everybody have to strap their seatbelts in. This is gonna be a bumpy ride.
Let me share the article here, and I want you to notice how the narrative has changed in light of the fact that the diocese has now come forward. I want you to notice how Pavone's narrative has changed, and I want to ask the question, why wasn't he saying this before? Watch this. Frank Pavone, the National Director of Priests for Life, was notified of his recent laicization. A diocesan official has told CNA, contradicting the ex-priest's repeated claims that he has not received official notification of the Vatican's decree dismissing him from the clerical state. An official with the Amarillo Diocese in Texas, that's where he's coordinated, who asked not to be identified by name, told CNA that, quote, the canonical process was followed, including physical and electronic notifications of his laicization at the proper time, end quote. Now watch this. The diocese has spoken out and said, hey, that's not true. We have notified him, and we did do so at the proper time. Physical and electronic notifications. Watch how his narrative has now changed. The official's account is at odds with Pavone's prior statement to CNA and other media outlets claiming that he has received no such formal notification. Pavone, who plans to hold a live stream press conference Friday ahead of next week's March for Life in Washington, D.C. By the way, this article was just put out yesterday. Provided CNA with a different answer Thursday when asked about the diocesan official statement. Quote, I have no idea what they sent me. The communication broke down a long time ago, he wrote in January 12 email. This is from Pavone. Quote, they may indeed have sent something. I simply did not see it. End quote. Now, hold on. Why didn't we hear that before? I mean, I'm going to read some more because there's more stuff that comes out in this. But I want to ask the question, why didn't we hear that before? Before the narrative was, I haven't been notified. I haven't been notified. I haven't been notified. Why weren't we hearing before the diocese said this? Well, they may indeed have sent me something. I just haven't seen it yet. I never heard Pavone say that. He never gave the benefit of the doubt to the diocese and left it out as an option that, perhaps they sent something to me, but I just haven't seen it. If Pavone ever said that, I never saw it for sure. But what I did see is plenty of statements on his part just saying, I wasn't notified. I wasn't notified. I wasn't notified. But now it's, okay, well, maybe I was notified, but I just didn't see it. And he's also saying communication broke down a long time ago. He's going to speak a little bit more about that in a moment. So I'm going to push pause on that point. But do you have anything that you want to add so far to this, Kevin?
I think, well, there's a missing part of it that we get to a little bit later. This is kind of like the wind up, but like the question is, why didn't he see it? And the article has that answer. And when I read it earlier this morning, my eyeballs about fell out of my head because I was like, oh boy, now it's like I knew what was going on. And we talk a lot about nuance on the reason in R&T here. And, this is one of those things where there's going to have to be a little nuance, but at the same time, this is very serious. So as we continue on, people will hopefully see like what the point is.
Yeah, but notice how the narrative is changing. Before it was, I wasn't notified. Now it's, well, maybe I was notified, but I didn't see it. And that should have been what was said all along. Watch the rest of this where we weren't hearing this before, but now we're hearing it. Watch. CNA broke the news of Pavone's laicization December 17, 2022 that day. Pavone said it was the first time he had heard of the November 9th, 2022 decree by the Vatican's Dicastery for the Clergy, which cited Pavone's blasphemous communications on social media and, notice this, persistent disobedience of the lawful instruction of his diocesan bishop. This is going to be important for what's about to break next. Without providing any specific details, the information was contained in a letter that Archbishop Christophe Pierre, the Apostolic Nuncio to the United States, sent to the United States bishops. Quote, how did CNA learn about this? Before I did, Pavone asked at the time, later adding that CNA's inquiry was, quote, the very first communication that came to me about this. Before it was, this is the first time I heard it. This was the first communication that came about me. Now it's, well, it's possible that they sent it to me, but I just didn't see it. 4 days later, in an interview with the YouTube show Truth, Culture, Life, Pavone made similar statements when he was asked if he was still a priest. Quote, I haven't gotten anything. I can't show you a letter or a piece of paper that tells me I'm dismissed from the priesthood. He said, I don't have any instructions. I wasn't told, oh, you can't dress like a priest. You can't be called father. You can't say mass. I haven't been told any of that. Pavone has made similar statements to other media outlets. That Pavone, a well-known figure in the pro-life movement for many years with a loyal social media following, would incur such a severe canonical penalty and then not receive any formal notice of it, either from his bishop or the Vatican. Further stoked criticism of the Vatican's actions online among Pavone's many supporters. Many people jumped on the bishop, jumped on the Vatican, and went right with Pavone's side of this story. An online petition calling for his reinstatement to the priesthood is reportedly garnered 45,000 signatures. The Amarillo official who spoke to CNA would not clarify when the diocese informed Pavone that he could no longer exercise his priestly functions. But Pavone on Thursday still professed to know nothing about the official notification. Watch this. Quote, well, they can say they informed me, but that statement alone ignores the entire context of the fact that communication was abusive, broken, and dishonest for years, he wrote in an email. Again, people have to understand none of this was normal. Pavone again referred to CNA to a lengthy account he has posted on his website detailing his past conflicts with Amarillo Bishop Patrick Zurek and other church leaders. Pavone said the conflicts with Zurek reached the point that he asked the diocese to not contact him anymore. Quote, I told the bishop not to, and the Vatican knew it, he told CNA. This was not a normal relationship. It was abuse. If they say they sent something, they are admitting to violate a very serious, long-standing set of instructions to stop abusing and harassing me, he said. Wait, we didn't hear anything about this from Pavone before. He wasn't saying, wait, well, maybe I received something from them, but I just didn't see it. But by the way, I told them to stop contacting me. We didn't hear that before. But now we're starting to hear he told them not to contact him. Wait, hold on. Wasn't one of the reasons that he was laicized for disobedience? How can you obey a bishop that you're telling stop contacting me? How can you be obedient to such a bishop? Now he's going to say, well, he was supposed to be transferred to someone else and incarnated somewhere else. But okay, but in that process, until that happens, you still need to obey who you're currently under. And if you're telling them stop contacting me, how are you going to be in obedience to this bishop? And wouldn't it make sense from their perspective if they're even told you can't even contact one of your priests anymore? How are you supposed to keep this person incarnated under you? And how are they supposed to continue to be under your authority? Wouldn't you say that might there be some reason?
Which leads to another issue, because one of the things that Pavone has said elsewhere on his site, I think I may have the document and pull it up,
Yeah.
but he what was it? With the breakdown of these communications and stuff, one of the things that Bishop Zurek had said to Pavone, and Pavone has admitted on his website, if I remember correctly, was that Zurek said, that, yeah, I get that you want to transfer to the Diocese of Colorado Springs. He said, but in good conscience, I can't let you do that because you are a repeat problem. You're just going to keep doing it over there, what you're doing here.
Well, he claimed that the Vatican backed him up on the fact that he can be transferred elsewhere. Any comments on that?
Well, I haven't seen the document from the Vatican proving that, but let's just, for sake of argument, let's say that that was the case.
Sure.
If the Vatican didn't override or supersede Zurek's authority on this, if it was still within Zurek's purview to handle this, then his not allowing it would have, if the Vatican didn't tell him just let it go through, then it is still his jurisdiction, and then it sounds to me like Zurek is making a stand, saying, no, you did stuff in New York, you did stuff here, the buck stops here. If I let you go to Colorado Springs, it's just going to be a plague on that diocese and just another nightmare for that bishop. So I'm just going to basically it's a buck stops here kind of a thing. So the argument that could be made, and I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with it, I'm just simply saying is that the argument that could be made is that Zurek is actually standing tall against all of the vitriol and everything that's being sent against him because he has the long view in mind, and or like the end game, which is this is a difficult problem enough as it is, admittedly, but I'm not just going to pass the buck on to the next bishop and then 5, 10, whoever many years from now, when something happens over there, it just kind of, a different characterization is starting to appear now, and it's much more. It's a bit uglier than what we were led to believe.
But again, we were hearing over and over, I wasn't notified, but we weren't told. But I told the diocese never to notify me of anything, never to contact me. We didn't hear that before. That was entirely absent. Now we're starting to hear something else in light of the fact that the other side has spoken up. My question is, why wasn't Pavone upfront with us and saying, well, the reason why I haven't been notified is I told the diocese not to contact me. And by the way, they may have just violated my personal request to them and still notified me. I just may not have seen it.
Which gets into another difficult issue because we have canon law and then we have civil law. There's nothing to my knowledge, and I'm not a canon lawyer, but there's nothing to my knowledge in canon law that permits a priest to sit there and tell his bishop, you have no communication with me. So I have to wonder if Father Pavone, in making this statement, was starting to go on the side of civil law. In which case, if this is now turning into a civil law case, Now we're going to have canon. What is it? I think it's 1373.
Well, he says this.
Revised penal code that's going to start coming up now.
Well, hold on. He says this, that abuse obviously continues, and therefore our canonical and civil remedies will continue as well. Civil remedies.
Oh, okay, there you go. So, all right. So, if we're in the realm of civil law, a priest can't sue his bishop. Look what happened to Father Perrone out in the Archdiocese of Detroit. Now, I know Father Perrone. I've met him. He's a good man. But when I found out that he was thinking of suing Monsignor Bugarin civilly, I hoped and prayed that he wasn't going to do that, because prior to the penal code being revised to the 83 Code of Canon Law, I think it was Canon 1375. But basically, a priest can't civilly sue his bishop. That's that's a no-go. So Pavone did not heed the advice, and I know he decided to listen to the canonical advice of a very influential cardinal who I will not name, and he decided to sue Monsignor Bugarin, because in the words of as it was reported to me, the words of the cardinal to Father Perrone were, because you're dealing with men who don't fear God, but they do fear man. So in other words, sue them in civil court.
Which is contrary to what St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, right?
Where specifically?
I thought it's either 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, where Paul chides the Corinthians for trying to sue each other civilly instead of dealing with matters internally.
Yeah, well, I mean, go back to Jesus, try to settle things with your brother first, And
but he will say, I tried that. He would say, I already explored that.
Yeah, and in Perrone's case, yes, he was totally, what happened as soon as I heard the news that he was being accused, I knew exactly what it was, and I knew it wasn't true. And then, as it turns out, it was basically, from all six purposes, being like a setup or something. Somebody fudged statements from one of the accusers, and so Father Pavone won in a civil court of law. Now, like I said, I will defend Perrone up and down the hilt, but I did not agree that it was a wise move to sue Monsignor Bugarin, because Bugarin is the representative of the Archbishop of Detroit on these matters. And I knew that what was going to happen was that canon in the law was going to be pulled. And I said, please don't do this, Father Pavone. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. But he did it. And all the other charges were dropped. Rome found him innocent even of the sexual accusations. But they found merit in how he had sued Bugarin, and Perrone had to issue a letter of apology, and it was very, very. Let's just say I didn't like the letter. I thought it was extremely unfair, but that's my personal, private, subjective opinion. Now, with something like with Pavone, it's similar in that if Pavone is going to go down the civil route of a lawsuit, that canon gets pulled, and now it's even worse. Although if according to the Vatican he is laicized already, then maybe it doesn't matter anymore anyway, because if he's a laicized priest, he's not functioning, so therefore that canon might not apply. I'll leave that for the canon lawyers to argue, but either which way, it's not looking good. What's coming out now is like well, I remember when things were happening with Pavone back in 2011. I was living in Wisconsin at the time, and as I was reading it, I wasn't very impressed with what Pavone, how he was handling the situation. He was running up and down the media saying, "I'm just going to get incarnated to another diocese." Da, 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 da. And I'm like, why don't you play the humility card right now? Be humble, like what everybody's been saying now, right? If that had happened back in 2011, instead of bellowing up and down the media, that he was just going to, it doesn't really matter what Zurek says, I'm just going to get incarnated into the diocese. Incarnation is not to be treated lightly like this. And he's treating it like it's a dime a dozen, And I'm like, no, they just get them out like candy. That I wasn't very impressed with that. I thought it was very disrespectful of what this canonical process is. and the serious reasons for which it should be exercised, you know. But here we are. I mean,
Well, my biggest concern is why wasn't he upfront with this to begin with? Because that completely changes the narrative that he was selling previously. If he had just told us this up front, but he's only telling us this now because the other side has come out and said something. That's the only way we found out about it, is because they have actually spoken up for themselves and said, hey, here's our side. And now we start to hear some walking back of some of the claims that he was making. But we should have heard that from day one. He should have been upfront. At this point, I honestly feel like the best thing for Pavone is to just plead the fifth and don't say anything anymore, because it seems like the more he speaks, the more he continues to dig a hole for himself. Best thing moving forward is just don't say anything anymore, because every time he opens his mouth, it gets worse for him.
That's exactly what I said back in 2011. I was like, quite frankly, I was like, Father, shut up. You keep digging yourself into a hole. You're not helping your case. Now, I know saying shut up like that is a pretty serious thing, but I don't mean it rudely. I mean it like, no, Father, like sit down, shut your mouth. Like you don't like. Do you know what's going on here? You're going to get flayed. In other words, it was out of charity that I was saying, just saying you're going to get flayed alive if you don't shut your mouth.
It would be better for him if he did. In other words, I think he would come out looking better than if he continues to speak, because the more he continues to speak, we go with it. I didn't go with it, by the way. I thought, okay, maybe that's possible, but I'm also give the benefit of the doubt for the other side. So I didn't just buy fully into what he was saying. I was saying maybe that's possible, but then again, maybe there's something else that we're missing here. And it turns out I was right. There's a lot that we were missing. But the more he said something, we would hear it and didn't sound right. And then we find out that, there's another side to it. And it just, in other words, it makes him look bad every time he says something, because it turns out that it wasn't entirely the full story. And it would have been better if he had just given the full story up front. Hey, it's possible they sent me something but I didn't see it. And by the way, I told them not to contact me anyway. So I don't know why I'm even here giving a radio interview complaining. I don't know why I'm even complaining to you about not receiving anything, because I told them not to contact me. He should have said that to begin with.
But that looks bad. That's not, and that actually would have hurt his case. It would have triggered that critical thinking more of, well, wait a minute, why did you tell them not to you're a priest. How can you tell your bishop not to contact? Wait, what? That doesn't jive.
Doesn't that support the claim of disobedience? Again, how are you going to obey your bishop? How are you supposed to obey a bishop that you've forbade to ever contact you?
Yeah, so it's like the onion. Gradually, the layers are being peeled back, and we're learning more of the greater of the picture, more of the innards of this thing as these layers are getting peeled back. And I mean, in some ways, I get I get what appears to have happened. We don't always reveal the truth, everything about ourselves. Like when we first meet somebody, we're not going to be shallow.
But it's not just not revealing truth. Hold on.
Yeah, it's not quite the same thing. But it's like when you're going to say, we're going to take this to the people of God, they're going to judge and decide this, or however he was putting it along those lines. Well, you're expecting the people of God to adjudicate a situation that is A, not their problem in the first place, not their jurisdiction, and B, and C, you're not giving the full information.
Yeah, anyway. He wasn't upfront with the people of God. And in fact, it was misleading to say I wasn't notified, when in fact he had already told the diocese, never contact me. And by the way, it's possible that they did send something to me, I just didn't see it. That's not really giving full disclosure to the faithful, for the faithful to somehow judge, which I don't know how the faithful are somehow to authoritatively judge over the institutional church anyway. So seems a little odd to appeal to the laity anyway.
Yeah, it was wrong. And he'll sit there and he'll garner sympathy points when he says things like, the bishops are Democrats and they just don't like or they're trying to, play to the party of death and da 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 da. And so he's playing the crowd at that point, and a lot of sympathies that people have. Now, I don't doubt it for 10 seconds. I mean, there was even a bishop several years ago, I remember he went on record as having said that. I think this was around 2008. It was around the time where that priest in Charleston, South Carolina diocese. He had made a strong statement in a homily, and the then apostolic administrator, I think, had to yank the priest for that. And then there was a bishop, I think, out in, I want to say California, but don't quote me. He made a statement, something to the effect of how we have to be careful with this. He said because he's like I'm pretty sure that not that at least half of my brother bishops voted Democrat or voted for Obama or whatever, something like that. Now people can fact check me. I'm going by memory on this, but I seem to recall that all those years ago. So Pavone can say certain things that really rile up the base, but if there's no real full disclosure of all of the facts, then first of all, it's not our jurisdiction anyway to decide all of this, but it's doubly not unfair because it's like, well, you're asking us to do this and you're slanting it all in your favor. Priests cannot act this way with their bishops. Bishops have a lot. The way it's been put to me is this: bishops have a lot of power in the church. In the olden days, we used to have the chapter of canons in every diocese that would keep a check on episcopal power. Well, that's not so much the case anymore. And as I understand it, it has to do with, we can thank John Carroll for that, why we don't have chapters or canons in the United States. But the nuts and bolts of it is they do have a lot of power. Yes, you have bishops out there that have no trouble or no scruples abusing it. But the abuse of a thing does not take away its use. Abusus non tollat usum. And even if you are being treated unjustly, you still have to obey in all things but sin.
Yeah.
So like I know a priest that this was in my article, The Wheat and the Tares, that we talked about last summer. I know of a priest who was told by his bishop to commit liturgical abuses. The priest refused, and the bishop exiled him to the northern deanery of his diocese, and was put under a pastor who was given explicit instructions to break this young priest of his rigidity. Well, I'd say he was broken, all right. I never finished that story in The Wheat and the Tares. But I will say this. They broke him all right. He got to such a low in his priesthood that he got caught out in the stairwell going up to the choir loft in the arms of the organist. Now, I kind of think the story is refreshingly heterosexual, but having said that, that's how he got broken, because he violated his vow of celibacy, and he had to make good on all of that, understandably so. So I don't know whatever became of that poor man. I really don't know, but and I'm not going to mention names or anything, but this is what happens. This is what happens to priests. So that's why there is a priest underground, and who know what will happen if you don't do what your bishop says, even when you know you're not supposed to. And there's a lot of deep sympathy for Pavone. I have deep sympathy for him. I really do. Contrary to how I may be coming across now, I've been thrown around the ecclesiastical ringer too. It's not my first time at the rodeo. But at the end of the day, some injustices must be suffered while the processes work themselves out. You can't start a personal crusade. It just doesn't work.
If you do, at least be upfront with people. Here's something that I found interesting. This is continuing in the article. Frank, you're incorrigible, his bishop told him back in 2017.
Yeah.
It says, a letter dated May 5th, 2017, a little over a year after Waldo's is from Zurek. The bishop wrote that he would pursue the priest's laicization if Pavone didn't voluntarily submit his own request to be dismissed from the clerical state. Zurek gave Pavone 15 days to respond. Quote, "It is with a heavy heart, but also absolute frustrations with you that I write this letter," is how Zurek began. He cited Pavone's scandalous behavior, involvement in partisan politics, persistent disobedience, and lack of respect for legitimate ecclesiastical authority, control, and oversight. Well, I'll say I mean, if you're telling the bishop you can't even contact me, that seems to corroborate such things. Okay. Much of the
Yeah.
letter concerns the 2016 episode dealing with the aborted baby's remains. Quote, I have received hundreds of emails, many calls, letters, and notes from Catholics, non-Catholics, and non-Christians. Zurek wrote, all were outraged, horrified, and deeply scandalized by your actions. The gravest damage has resulted. Zurek also cited Pavone's partisan rhetoric in favor of one political candidate and party, which the bishop said was a violation of canon law. Frank, you are incorrigible, Zurek wrote. You have no respect for me, my office, my authority, my oversight, he wrote. I have been dealing with your disobedience and scandalous behavior for years. There is nothing more I can do with you, he wrote. In good conscience, I will not even consider allowing you to excardinate to another diocese, the bishop concluded. You would just continue to be disobedient and act scandalously as you have in your excardination from New York into the Amarillo diocese, he wrote, adding, my predecessor, Bishop Yanta, told me that he deeply regrets incardinating you into the Amarillo diocese. That backs up exactly what you were saying about how the bishop effectively doesn't want to release him because he knows that this is going to continue to happen. And frankly, the bishop's case sounds more convincing in light of the fact that I'm hearing Pavone moving the goalposts, changing his story. Now we're finding out more information that undermines what he said before. And it all backs up this notion that there's a problem with obedience to the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the main grievance of the bishop and has been for a very, 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 very long time. So again, the very bishop he's incarnated under, even though he feels that he should be able to go and be under somebody else, that has not happened. And therefore, you should be submissive to them in anything but sin until such time as they excardinate you and you're incarnated somewhere else. But if you tell your bishop, hey, don't even contact me. Imagine one of my kids telling me, living in my house, I go to their room, they say, you can never come in my room ever again. You can, talk to the hand. You can never talk to me. You can never tell me what to do. I will never do the dishes again. Never have any communication with me whatsoever. I'm just going to stay here in my room. And I'm not going to go to school. When you tell me I have to go to school, I'm not going to go to school. I'm just going to sit here.
Well, then at that point, see, this is where you one up your kid and you sit there and say, okay, well, then you are officially a squatter. Get out of my house.
Yeah.
Parents,
could you imagine?
You are officially a squatter. So I will call the law on you.
He says that their communication was abusive. Well, I'm sorry, but just simply telling people that they can't contact you, even to the extent that you can't even be notified you're laicized. Come on. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, please don't send me abusive content, which I'm not saying that the bishop ever did. I don't, you know what? Maybe there's some truth to that. But honestly, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the bishop at this point because his stories just hasn't been adding up from day one.
Well,
but even if there was some abusive stuff, that doesn't mean don't ever communicate with me whatsoever.
Yeah, and this is why back in 2011, when everything first flared up, I was telling people, I said every sentence that comes out of his mouth, he's just condemning himself even more. I said this in 2011, and I saw no reason to withhold that now. I'm glad that situation from 2011, at least according to Bishop Zurek, was resolved. He wrote a letter, I think, in 2014 saying that things with the certain questions he had were resolved to his satisfaction. So that was good. But you don't incriminate. The Fifth Amendment in civil law is there for a reason in the United States, and part of that is to allow you to defend yourself properly. Which is why, what was it, a year or two ago, when the Kyle Rittenhouse case was going on, when the prosecuting attorney had Kyle on the stand, and he was trying to rip into him for his exercising of the First Amendment, and the judge himself cut the prosecution off and said, "You know better than that. He's actually that's the constitutional right. You know better than." He's like, "Change your line of questioning." Because the prosecuting attorney was trying to spin it as, you've kept silent this entire time. That's given you time to know the information, maybe change your story, Well, it doesn't matter. First Amendment is the, I mean, yeah, that's it. The right to remain silent is the right to remain silent. It's inviolable in the United States Constitution, and the judge had to call him out on that. And it was like, I get that when people are public figures and when things happen, like statements have to be made. Look at what's going on with like the Representative George Santos guy in New York. The guy that, they're basically fabricated or embellished, I think is the word he's using, his resume. You know, yeah, that's the time to say something after you've had time to really weigh things. And he did. He didn't respond immediately. He took a couple of days or something and responded accordingly. To nobody's satisfaction, by the way. Quick sidebar: he should resign. But having said that, so with Pavone, I just feel bad because I knew in 2011 that it was going to go south sooner or later. I saw how Pavone was behaving, and when I read Zurek's letter a couple of weeks ago, where he said, "Frank, you are incorrigible," those are tough words to read. They're tough words because Pavone is a beloved figure here in the church in the United States. He's done a lot of good work, but it just seems to me that he got too big for his britches. And I have to say that Bishop Zurek is looking more and more right.
It looks like it.
Because Pavone keeps showing how Zurek is right.
I want to get your comments on this. Let's take a look at this. Pavone says, my public comments are consistent with what the official says here. I've been saying that I personally have not seen the decree, nor has my canonical team. Again, that's not exactly what he was saying before, but okay.
Now we're getting into mental reservation land.
Yeah, but why didn't he make that more explicit? Because he was trying to capitalize on the notion that he hasn't been sent anything and just became aware of this through a public leak. He was capitalizing and exploiting that. So it's not just a mental reservation, it was misleading. Now look at this.
Yeah, there's some funny business there. I don't want to say dishonest or disingenuous.
I don't know that.
There's something funny there.
I'm not going to accuse him of intentionally being dishonest or something, but what he was doing was incredibly misleading. I don't know his intentions, if they were intended to be misleading, but what he was doing was misleading by not telling us this. But here, I want to get your comments on this. But again, both the diocese and the Vatican knew of my communication to the bishop that any further effort to contact me directly would be considered and treated as harassment. What in the world? So they can't even contact you about just basic regular things. That's considered being treated as harassment. Imagine again, one of our children, if you're a parent out there and your kids say, if you ever come in my room and ever tell me that I have to go to school, that is harassment and abuse. What? And look at this.
Yeah, we're automatically going into civil law at that point, because I don't think there's anything in canon law that gets into that.
But here it continues. In my experience, this was not a process, it was abuse, and the authorities need to respect that, whether they agree with it or not. They need to respect that, whether they agree with it or not. So they have to basically bow down to his way of doing things and literally can't contact him because he says it's abusive. Is he the bishop and they're priests? Well, I thought it was the other way around.
And when you look at the document, he's got like statements that people have said about how, like, comments that the bishop has said in private to other people, or other groups of like priests and stuff. But it's okay. Be that as it may, you know what? I'm a former seminarian. Okay. I could tell you stories till the cows come home about the spinelessness and fecklessness of ecclesiastical authority in the church today. Stuff that would make no man want to go to the priesthood. Okay. I still respected things enough, not only from my own. It's like that famous line in A Man for All Seasons. Yes, I give the devil the benefit of the law for my own safety's sake. Yeah, I mean, I had to do that because it's not just about me. It's about It's about everything. And in the church, you especially when you are a priest and you make those promises of respect and obedience, you know, you must work within the system. There's no working outside of the system in the church.
Mhm.
That's not how this works, you know. And when you're thinking that you're just going to do this, that, or the other thing, no, there is a system. However, I mean, then we can talk about the status quo, like what I did in my article, The Wheat and the Tares. We can talk about the justice behind certain mindsets that go into that status quo. We can talk about that. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, what is and what you can do within
Mhm.
that. So, for instance, in my case, I was placed into a seminary that worked primarily with younger guys. I was an adult vocation. I was 36 to 38 years old at the time. I'm now 41. And it wasn't a good fit,
Mhm.
seminary that I was at. And I went to my vocations director twice, even up to and including my bishop. And I was basically told, well, the bishop himself flat out told me that there's no remedy. You just have to offer it up.
Mhm.
And that was said to me on August the 14th, 2019. And it was basically at that moment that I kind of knew that I was not much longer for this, for staying in the seminary, because it was having adverse effects on my health. That's how bad it was.
Mhm.
And I tried to work within the system. I tried to be respectful to everybody. I wasn't perfect, but I tried to do things as, you know, to be respectful. But at the end of the day, when I finally got that fiat, as it were, from the bishop and just told to suck it up, you know, offer it up kind of a thing, and that, Kevin, these are the kinds of sacrifices that you'll have to make it when you're a priest, you know, so get used to it now, is basically what I was being told. Well, I still had a choice at that time. And I said, well, I can either sacrifice my health, or I could leave. And so I took some time to think about it. I sat on it. And then it was Thursday, the 26th of September of 2019, at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, when it came clear to me, it was time to go. And I was gone within 36 hours. Um, but here's the point. That's all the background to the point, which is, in that status quo, if you are a seminarian, you don't write your own ticket.
Mhm.
And unless you have the social graces enough where you can manipulate, and I know a guy who was very good at this at my seminary, and he even admitted it to me that he was doing this to people. Unless you have the social graces to manipulate people to where you basically give them the idea, but they think it's their own. So in other words, if you don't tickle people's ears, you know, then, you know, you're writing your own ticket. We are the authorities, not you. Who do you think you are? You need to learn
Mhm.
some humility, you know. That's the kind of stuff that we could sit and talk about, because it's there are justice issues there and stuff like that. But you don't. I mean, I'm not. After I left seminary, I didn't go on a personal crusade. You
Mhm.
know, I found a job. I've been working at this job ever since, and you know, that's just how it is. You know, I now own a home. You know, I have a car. You know, I mean, you move on with your life. You
Mhm.
know, you take the experience and you move on. But uh, no real change is going to happen if you're just bucking the system. That's not this. You know, we're not into activism in the Catholic Church. That's never been part of our ethos. We're into holiness and sanctity, leading to genuine reforms in the church. That's what this is all about, and that's why that point about, like, what I was saying back so many years ago, and like what you've been saying since this all broke with Father Pavone, is that is what will make the difference. That obedience,
Mhm.
because that stands stronger as a light in the midst of the darkness. You know, that's what's inspiring to people, not this crusade and activism. You know, and I know a lot of people are going to be, you know, they may disagree with me vehemently, they may disagree respectfully. or just or disagree in general. But at the end of the day, that's what it's going to come down to. You can't. You'll never win against the house. You'll never
Yeah.
win against the house.
And
In
and
terms.
and I'm really starting to question if he's going down the obedience Padre Pio route, if he's speaking of civil recourse, not just canonical, but civil recourse. And
Well, to
I'm
be
just
fair, these statements I think were timed to
uh-huh.
before he did that. So I have to be fair. Uh, I was cautiously optimistic when he had that video of him with his collar in front
Yeah.
of Padre Pio. I was cautiously optimistic, but I'm not seeing authentic fruits of that.
But the statement on civil recourse was just recent, wasn't it? I thought it was on the 12th. Did I misread that?
Let me see. Let me just.
I'm pretty sure I just read it on the that it came out on the 12th. Let me double check. But let me go
That
back
abuse
to
obviously continues, and therefore canonical and civil remedies will continue as well.
and what's the date on that statement?
That's to this article dated yesterday.
Exactly. So my concern is, can you imagine Padre Pio saying, I'm going to fight this through civil recourse?
No, I can't actually. I can't.
I'm concerned about that if that means that he's going to pursue some kind of remedy here through civil law.
Good luck, because civil law in the United States recognizes the separation of church and state. It's the same reason why Anthony Gorge's case against the Archdiocese of New York basically didn't fly, because they were asking New York to litigate an internal matter of the Roman Catholic Church, and this is an internal matter of the Roman Catholic Church regarding the discipline of a priest. Now, unless there's another issue legally, I'm not a lawyer, but unless there's another issue that's separate from all of that, or that the separation of church and state does not infringe upon, I don't know, or have a bearing on, I should say, I don't know what civil grounds there would be. I don't know. I mean, I could call up a priest friend of mine who would probably answer that pretty quick, but I don't see that separation of church and state looms very large in these kinds of cases.
I'm trying to, for sure confirm the date on this. It really does seem like this is very recent.
Well,
Pavone again referred to as
the article was written yesterday.
it was written yesterday, but it says Pavone again referred to CNA to a lengthy account he has posted on his website detailing his past conflicts with Zurek. I told the bishop not to. That is communicated when the Vatican knew it. This was not a civil relationship. It was abuse. That abuse obviously continues, and
Yeah,
therefore our canonical and civil
it's heavily
remedies.
implied that's more recent since that video with him in the
And I'm
collar.
looking at the lengthy account, and I'm trying to find a date on it, and I'm not seeing a date, but
I don't think there would be a date.
but it has to be yesterday because the statements only make sense in light of the diocese coming out and saying that he was notified. So it has to be after the Padre Pio, video. It has to be after.
Yeah,
Because otherwise these comments wouldn't make sense.
it's heavily implied. I mean, it's the evidence seems to be overwhelmingly in that direction. Yeah.
So I'm very troubled by that. Civil remedies. What kind of civil remedies could really apply here in the case of his bishop? And also, what good is that ultimately going to do?
Slander, calumny, character assassination. I mean,
Okay.
any of those might apply
Okay.
because the bishop has made public statements.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, again, I cannot judge the legal merits of it, but I wouldn't be
Okay.
surprised if that's going to be among them. But like harassment in and of itself, that's why people have restraining orders. But again, for a priest to get a restraining order on his bishop, we're not talking like anything sexual, let's say, where like there was that priest in Michigan who was claiming that his pastor was trying to, was making passes at him, and the priest had to act accordingly. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about a bishop trying to rein in a man that he has deemed incorrigible, and that's an internal civil matter within the church.
I mean, I
Uh,
haven't seen that in anything like the bishop is doing anything directly to threaten him or something that he would need to have that kind of civil recourse. I haven't seen anything from the bishop, and his side that would lend itself to that narrative. Not that he's even saying that. I don't even think Pavone is even saying that. I'm just wondering what kind of civil recourse would apply here, and how is this ultimately going to help the case of laicization?
No, it'll just. He says the next pope could reinstate me. Well, not if you're turning around and suing civilly your bishop, because now you're running the risk of Canon 13. I think it's 73 again.
And the laity can't reinstate him either. So appealing to the laity is not going to really matter
No,
here.
but this is that activism coming out. It's that public pressure. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, this it's a cluster bomb right now of a whole bunch of just dirty stuff. You know, and simply put, appealing to the laity to decide this is actually itself an injustice
Mhm.
because we don't know the whole
We
story.
don't, and we clearly didn't know it from Pavone, because now Pavone is telling us more only because there's other evidence that made him look bad. So even Pavone did not inform us of the full story. So
Yeah,
for us who don't know everything, it's hard for us to really make a definitive judgment, which is why I hold out. Well, maybe Pavone has some other, evidence here, and again, maybe the bishop has some response, but what I'm seeing, however, is I'm seeing the bishop's account being more and more confirmed, and I'm
mm,
seeing Pavone's being less and less likely, and in fact, more and more misleading.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he can talk till the cows come home about all of the things that have been said, this or the other thing. But again, it's like it's like Frank, what are you talking about here? Like we are not in a position to adjudicate this, much less, you know, decide it for you. You know, this is not right what you are doing. You're asking us to judge our spiritual fathers. And if you anybody's ever seen the movie Beckett,
Mhm.
that scene where they bring him up on those trumped up charges, and he's just like, and he goes out, I think it's Mordred or whatever the guy's name was, and he's like, let's, which is in the greatest peril, about imperiling his mortal soul. And then that movie, Man of God, I think, came out recently about Saint Nectarios
Mhm.
uh, of Aegina.
Yeah.
I watched that. It was free. I don't know if it still is, but it was free to watch on YouTube a couple of months ago.
Mhm.
And I thought it was a very, very edifying movie.
Me
I
too.
mean,
I love that.
for those of you who don't know, it's about an Eastern Orthodox, I think Greek maybe,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
bishop named Saint Nectarios, and he was the one who authored the famous hymn in the East, the Agni Parthene, which I happen to just absolutely love. Very, very beautiful hymn to the Blessed Mother. And they showed the trials that he went through and all the skullduggery, even in the Eastern churches. Sin is not a transcendental, but it's pervasive. It touches upon all spectrums of human life. And so, but that was one line that really stuck out in that movie. And that's very poignant here. He would not utter a word against the man who ordained him, because he had such a love and such a reverence for that man. And
Mhm.
he's like, how can I say anything against my spiritual father? I'm not going to do that.
Mhm.
He prayed for him. He took his business elsewhere, in the sense of, he moved because there's different canonical
Mhm.
uh, canons in the East that would allow them to do certain things. And he ended up becoming the head of this convent there on the island of Aegina. And it was just a beautiful thing because he would never utter a word, even when he knew that this was all just total bunk, and he could have called it out, but he no, he suffered in silence. And at one point, when they're trashing the convent, trying to get evidence that he had raped a nun, uh, you know, they're all ready. The others are ready to go after this, and he just looked at them and just went,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
very edifying, very, very edifying, you know. And that's not to say that in cases of true injustice that you don't try to deal with it. Like he would write, Saint Nectarios would write to his spiritual father and say, "Can I please meet with you and talk with you? I don't know what you've heard, but can I?" You know, and it was all they were just rebuffed. But he suffered in silence. And if he had a complaint, he tried to talk with it to the right people, you know. And the laity all around him were trying to, you know, were saying that one guy that was working with closely is just like, I don't understand, you know, you could have been the metropolitan, you could have been the Archbishop of Constantinople, blah 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 blah, you know, and you know, and yet the Eastern Church got some of the best spiritual writings of the 19th to 20th centuries out of this man, in part because he suffered greatly, you know, and rich theology, yeah. So and that beautiful hymn on to boot. So, you know, good comes out of evil, but at the end of the day, you have to remain faithful to Christ and to the structure of His church. It's not pleasant. It's not easy. You know, sometimes you will be thrown upwards, and by the church, or at least by her representatives, by her clergy. It's hard. It's hard, but you know, like Mike, I think you've told the story once about how, I think publicly on the show, where you talked about what happened with you with a priest in communion once, right?
That's just one example.
Yeah.
I got a lot more.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to share publicly. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, but like, so I mean, so you've been through it too.
Yeah.
And I don't see you going off on a crusade. You didn't start reasoning theology in order to build a base, in order to go after these people. You know,
No.
now I'm not saying Pavone did that either, but
Sure.
but I'm simply saying is you don't. If you're going to go after people, if you're going to do things within the church because you have a vendetta, Christ will humble you very quickly. And
Seems we're starting to see that, because I knew there was another side to the story. There had to be. We're starting to hear it, and it's actually making sense for the other side. That's why I kept saying, I want to hear what the diocese has to say, because this isn't adding up. He's saying that they are persecuting him. They would have been happy to serve him those papers, and yet they didn't serve the papers. That's not adding up. Something, you know, is missing here. So
yeah,
I don't know. Well,
it's hard because like we want to be fair. We
Mhm.
don't know all of the individual things that have happened. We don't know any private statements, and this is why I think in a way it's not fair for Pavone to be duking this out in the public like this, because it's like you're asking us to judge when it's not our place, and we're
We
not
don't.
getting
Yeah.
we don't have the whole story, and quite frankly,
Right.
we probably never will. You
Right.
know, because
Right.
if there are even hidden things here, like let's just say, sake of argument, Pavone is right. Let's say Zurek is doesn't want the pro-life stuff because he's a Democrat and is actually part of the culture. And I'm not saying that's true. Let's say, just sake of argument, let's say that all that is true.
Sure.
We're not. How do we know?
Right.
How can we know this? It's an accusation made on top of thousands of other accusations. It's
Right.
just tit for tat, this, that, and the other, back and forwards. Hi, you know, we the laity, we have families, we got jobs, roof it overhead, food on our table, feed our kids. You know, what is this to us? Tiamoi kai soi in Greek. What is this to me and to you? You know, it just doesn't make for good. I mean, it makes for good headlines, news articles. You know, priest goes against bishop. Rah, you know,
Yeah, to exploit the situation to trash a hierarchy that people are already dissatisfied with.
exactly. And it's just feeding those flames even further. But it's not going to get anybody any. It's not going to go anywhere at the end of the day, except end in disgrace. And it's sad.
Yeah, Kevin, I appreciate you coming on. We're at an hour. We're going to go ahead and end it there. Thank you so much for doing this, taking your time out. I really, really do appreciate it. Excellent commentary, and definitely can have you back on. We'll talk a little bit more about some other situations that are developing. We'll speak about them off the air, and so we'll have Kevin back on. He'll be back. So I know a lot of y'all were asking for Kevin to be back on. So here he is. He'll be back for some more episodes coming soon. All right. You want to point us to anything? Your blog, YouTube channel?
Nah, I'm good for now.
You good for now? Well, I'll put it at the very least in the show notes so y'all can go and check it out. All right, that's gonna do it, y'all. We will see you later. God bless. Oh wait, before you go, I would really appreciate it if you would consider supporting this channel. This is my primary means to provide for my family, and it also helps me to produce content like this video. If you would like to support me, become a patron by visiting patreon.com/Reason in Theology. You'll also get access to extra exclusive content when you become a patron. Lastly, hit that like button and the subscribe button, and be sure to leave a comment down below. God bless.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.